question is, how does inclusion fit into this? And it's such an important question that I think people have been struggling to kind of answer because it's such a new space. And today we are joined by some of the leading experts in this space, and that's what makes this so exciting, because we have Patrick Ford-Hutchinson joining us from Northumberland Country Council. He's a coordinator and has years of experience. We have Louise Dawson, who actually my co-founder and partner in Mirai Partners has actually worked with before. I just learned that. She's the head of inclusion and specialist assessor for the BSME Inclusion Network. And Claire, thank you so much for joining us from the lovely group of schools that is Aldar. And really excited to know about your experience too, because it's really in that kind of public-private partnership space within the UAE's context. And of course, the lovely managing partner of Mirai Partners, and of course, my co-founder, Christine Nasserghodski. We did this again. Yes, we are running these weekly webinars, and we're running them because we want to make sure that we can get the kind of the amazing expertise that exists in our community and bring it to you, so that we can all support each other in this journey for better outcomes for our children and teachers. So without further ado, I'll let Christine take over. And yes, really excited to have you all here.
Thank you, Naila. I'm also really excited about this too, because I think, you'd probably agree that outside of literacy, special education needs is not our area of expertise. And so we really rely on the expertise of people around us. And schools around the region, and when I say the region, I'm talking about the Middle East, North Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa, are really in various stages of welcoming students back into in-person learning. And their experiences really do vary. So some students have had almost a year of online learning at this stage. Some continue to be learning primarily online. And then others have had more of a hybrid experience, perhaps being in and being out of school. And I know our panelists all have students at various stages of re-entering. But at the same time, while schools, many of the schools that we work with rose to the challenge of distance learning really rapidly, digitizing the learning experience, supporting students with special education needs has been a little bit of a black box. It's a unique challenge. And in September, a McKinsey report really highlighted the importance of trying to bring students with special education needs back into schools, into in-person learning, and prioritizing them as much as possible. So I want to know, what has that looked like in your context? What have you been able to do to bring students back in? How have you been able to prioritize the most vulnerable students in your community? And I'm going to start up with Patrick. I wrote country on the slide. I apologize. That's Northumberland County in the UK. But Patrick, I'd love to hear, you now have a mandatory return to in-person learning. So you have a government that's saying we need to get students back into school. But throughout this experience, how have you been able to prioritize the inclusion of special education needs students?
Well, what we found in Northumberland is that the lockdowns have affected the youngest learners and those with the most complex needs throughout the whole process. This is our actual third lockdown that we've gone through, where schools have been closed, and we found this through the last two as well. And what we found, it was very important to get the younger learners, those with the most complex needs, which meant that we're struggling to communicate, regulate, and get them back into education as quickly as possible. So special educational needs in the UK, it was never closed totally compared to our mainstream counterparts. What we had to make the decision as leaders in schools to what children we wanted to get back into school. And this was either down to their need, their age, or if they had outside agency involvement where we felt they were at risk. But what we found for all learners coming back now is that we need to re-establish those routines. What our learners need is that they need to be in a consistent setting to learn, and they have to have reliability and desirability in the education setting they're in. So this is really at this time in school now, where we're looking at the second week of having all children back in. We're really looking to re-establish those routines, re-establish the consistency, re-establish the relationships with staff, to make the environment reliable and desirable for all our children so they can make the most progress. What we've found during this is that the quality of assessment needs to be at the top. We need to have taken snapshots of children throughout this period, whether it be before COVID, after a lockdown, or what we've had over in the UK as well. We've had bubble closures, where if there's been a case in a bubble in a school where a year group, a class, the whole class would go off for 10 days to 2 weeks. So we need to be taking snapshots all the time to see where the children are, and then to see if there's been any regression or if there's going to be any lack of progress going forward. And what this allows us to do is where we are in the process now in the school I'm working, is that we're looking to put in high quality academic or therapeutic intervention in place, and thinking about our approaches in the classroom to the cohorts we teach, to ensure that we are meeting their needs and we are getting them to at least back to their pre-COVID levels, and hopefully they can kick on from there. But as I know a lot of us will know, is that with children with special educational needs, it is a big struggle to get them into those routines, and it's not just a flick on flick off with these children, and it's a long process of making sure that we have got everything in place for them.
I want to pick up on something that you said that's really interesting in the UAE context. It's this idea of reliability and desirability, because families in our context currently have the choice to have their students at home or to send their children to school. And for a variety of reasons, including multi-generational households, which are very common here, many communities have been quite hesitant to send their children back. And so, Claire, as you know, you oversee inclusion across a really diverse group of schools, including the charter schools, private schools, and the ADNAC schools. When you've been really prioritizing the needs of special education needs students upon their return, how have you been encouraging schools to really create that reliability and desirability that brings students back in?
It definitely has been a challenge, and quite different whichever group of schools you look at. So for our group of private schools, really generally people couldn't wait to get their children back in. You know, there are a cohort which we're still working on encouraging back through some personal relationship, really getting the relationship of trust with the parents, and making sure they feel safe and know that their children are safe. So there's been a lot of parental work that's been done prior to getting the higher needs students back in the private settings. But in ADNOC and the charter schools, which have mainly an Emirati cohort, there has been a very little take up of coming back to face-to-face learning, not just for students of determination, but really just general students. It's a very small percentage of students that are choosing to come back, which is very frustrating, because the ones that are coming back are just making accelerated progress. They're just ready to learn. Our students in Abu Dhabi have been out for a year. You know, we've been closed for a year, so it's a very long time for those children not to have access, just general education, socializing, friendship groups. So much has been lost and missed, and it's really multiplied for those students of determination. You know, it's that they have regressed. Some of them cannot access anything online. You know, they can't access anything independently, so they've had to have an adult with them. So any assessment or that's been administered, we don't know if it's how much assistance they've had. So, you know, baselines are really not accurate, so we don't even know really where to pick up with them when they do come in. So that it's a sense of urgency that we have to get them back in. We work very hard with individual risk assessments, with families, and with the children themselves. And, you know, and trying to encourage. But with the multi-generational households, it is a huge concern for some families, and you know, and it's a valid concern. So, you know, we can push and persuade as much as we can, but at the end of the day, if the family doesn't feel comfortable, then we have to respect that and just try and provide the quality that we you know, we are doing and can do, but it's a frustration for sure.
I think that point about relationships is one that has come up time and time again across all topics of education over this past year. Louise, I'd love to hear, how have you been able to prioritize inclusion during this year where you're at Jumeirah College, which has been, you know, open primarily, aside from, you know, everyone's had to close here and there for different reasons. But how have you prioritized inclusion there? And what have you seen across the inclusion network at BSME as well, in terms of strategies to prioritize inclusion?
Yeah, so I think when we first went into lockdown on March the 5th, way back when, we basically brought our Easter holiday early, and we had 2 weeks to get online. And again, being with primarily private schools, being able to have access to technology and the internet, and having students who were used to that technology, a lot of our children were able to continue accessing education. And I actually think across Dubai, many schools did a really good job of keeping children engaged, keeping children online, and keeping them on task. And I think also because parents are paying that private fee, which is what Claire said, they have much more invested interest in having their children online. I think our highest need children were the biggest challenge for us, especially those children that couldn't access the technology and did need that adult with them. We put in, a lot of schools here put into place we put in a very tiered structure of support. So each child had a named buddy. So if they went off the radar or if they needed extra support, that buddy was on that case. So in secondary, for example, each of my LSAs had 10 children, and each day they had to make contact with those 10 children and the 10 family parents and caregivers to say, do you need anything extra? How's it going? Are you okay? And so having that, being able to, to have those staff and to be able to disseminate that structure was key in making sure that we didn't lose children. We have got children that we know have returned to their home countries. So when we went into lockdown, we have children that returned to China, children that returned to South America, who are offline, and we do not know where they are. And we know that, and we're doing our very best to get in contact, and we're having communication with parents, but sometimes there's maybe 1 or 2 children that we, you know, per school who we don't know where they are. So safeguarding and all of that kicks in massively. And so I am a practitioner head of inclusion at a secondary school, Jumeirah College, and then in my second role, I'm the BSME network lead across 144 schools across the Middle East. So yes, same as Claire and Patrick, some of our children are home by choice due to medical needs or family structure. To return them into school, we did a lot of phased reintegration. So those that were fearful of coming into school, as Claire said, like with the family concerns about getting sick, we were bringing them in for an hour a day rather than bringing them in for the 6 hours straight off. So we had that phased, gradual reintroduction into school. We've seen a massive increase in well-being support need. Social and emotional need has skyrocketed, and I think that we're at the stage now where, yes, academics are important. Yes, we're still teaching. Yes, we're still delivering the curriculum. Yes, we're still doing assessments. But actually, if a child isn't in the right place to do that, then that child is supported individually with their social, emotional, mental health needs, especially our children with medical needs who are not in school as well. But yes, definitely increasing concern for those off the radar, increased concern for the well-being across the whole network. And that tends to be the topic of most of the webinars that are going on at the moment, is the well-being, because we know that if we get that physiological need in place first, we know the rest of it will come. But the fear is still there. I think we've seen an increase since parents are being vaccinated. We've seen quite a change since we've had that coming in, which is all good news for the future. But yeah, one-to-one support, buddying, relationships, like Claire said, yeah, all the same. We're doing the same things, just trying hard to keep our heads above water.
But what strikes me about the examples you shared is that there's a real structure to it. You know, the idea that every LSA is assigned, and we're using UAE lingo here, by the way, and I know we have people from other countries,
yeah.
but yeah, learning support assistants, but having somebody, whether it's a teaching assistant or an administrator in the school, who has a responsibility for a certain number of students, and that there's a regular call schedule. I think that certainly decreases the likelihood that you'll have a student fall through the cracks.
Yeah,
fascinating.
I think within the mainstream, that role was picked up by heads of year, by tutors. I mean, I don't think any of this has been one person or one department or one area of school. I think what's come out of this is a massive amount of teamwork and shared responsibility rather than individual. It's not my, as the head of inclusion, it's not just my job. Otherwise, I think we would probably have all cracked under the pressure. But that the ability to share that across the network, across the schools, and, you know, head teachers supporting each other, heads of year supporting each other, Senkos supporting each other. I think that's been a real nice thing that's come out of this, because there's lots of good things that have come out too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so one thing that's really clear is that wherever you are, there's a pretty good possibility that there'll be some continuation of hybrid learning into the next academic year. There's an organization out of the US called One Schoolhouse that does a lot of work in this online and hybrid learning space. And they delivered a survey to a large number of American in the US independent schools, and over 60% of the schools indicated that they expected to have some form of hybrid learning. So knowing that the possibility of having hybrid learning is sort of here to stay, or at least here to stay for the foreseeable future, Claire, in your experience and across the diversity of schools that you support, what are some of the most effective inclusion moves or strategies for those students who are going to be online for the next few months or the next year?
I mean, I think one of the very important things is that we have to remember is that they do deserve equal access. So even though they're choosing to stay at home, you know, obviously for any teacher, any subject teacher, class teacher, form teacher, it's very tempting to focus on the students who you've got in front of you, because of course you've got them there, you've got their responses, you've got all that lovely things, that all the reasons we all became teachers in the first place. But to ensure that lessons are still appropriately differentiated for the students who are not in school, and that is not easy. I say that not flippantly. It's a huge challenge, and has been a challenge for teachers to get effective differentiation via distance learning, because you just don't have the response that you have from the students who are there in your class. But I think that really needs to be a focus and a priority. I know from myself and my colleague who work in HQ here, doing that training and in small chunks, letting them try it, seeing if it works, working out the impact. So still that ongoing staff training, which is hard. It's a hard balance to achieve when staff have had to learn so much so quickly and are out of their comfort zone most of the time. We're very, very aware not to keep putting too many new expectations on them. But for the sake of the children, if you're just delivering things that they can't do, the gap is just going to get bigger and bigger. So that's a huge push for us. Something else that works really well, and that when we've done our quality assurance drop-ins, have been the use of breakout rooms. So the breakout room can be then entered obviously by the children who are distance learning, but then they can be joined by their peers in the class. So different peers can kind of be on the camera with different breakout rooms. And that's been a really nice way to get in-school students working with their peers who are still at home, and just maintaining those relationships, getting some collaboration going, making them feel part of the class and part of learning. So that's been a pretty effective thing that we've actually seen in practice. Encouraging the cameras on, and we've had such a challenge with this. It's so simple, and you'd think it was easy. It's the hardest thing for these children to put their cameras on. You lose so much if you don't have a facial cue from them. You have got no idea how how they're doing if you can't see their faces. And our Emirati students are the least reluctant to switch their cameras on. You know, they're so, you know, for cultural reasons, some of them are just swinging the lead, they just don't want to. But, you know, as much as possible, getting the relationship where they feel comfortable enough to have their camera on with you. I think that's, yeah, we haven't solved the problem. We've just made it a priority. We haven't really got an answer for that. And we've also, as the other colleagues have spoken about, targeted intervention. So making sure that gaps are picked up for these students who are both in school and distance and still trying to fill them wherever possible. So our schools have got a range of size of support teams. Some of them have got small support teams. Some of them have got really, really well-resourced human resourced support teams. But pulling in SLT to do those interventions if there's a lot of students in the class that haven't picked it up, rerunning the lesson. You know, I mean, the good thing about hybrid and having lessons recorded is that students can go back, you know, so really encouraging that way of working. And I do hope that that's something we keep, you know, we hold on to when we are one day all back. But, you know, have those lessons as a bank of revision or, you know, a basis for intervention. So it doesn't have to be a teacher running it. It can be an LSA, or it can be an inclusion assistant or a CA who actually just reruns the class and is there to pick up misconceptions. So we've had children who've done phenomenally well online, you know, without a doubt. Our students on the autistic spectrum have really thoroughly enjoyed not having any social stress. You know, they've enjoyed only having to look at their computer and not really talk to anyone, and academically probably doing great. You know, on the flip side, we've had children who just haven't really probably learned anything for a year. You know, and it's finding ways to reach those, I think, that, and I'm really sorry, I don't really have an answer to that, but the formative assessment that you do at the start of every session must be a sort of a sustained and regular practice. So you know that there is just, you're not going to keep the attention of a child who's learning via distance and doesn't know what's going on, you know. So wherever you can, and good use of your support staff if you're lucky enough to have them, which not everybody is, you know, I know that, but really utilizing them and in the breakout rooms is a way to address.
But even when you talk about the support staff, I think, you know, one takeaway is just to think about it as people within the community, because I know we do have some guests on the call or attendees who may not be in environments where there are support staff, but you know, if you really look at the range of who can be brought in to support lessons, especially if something's pre-recorded, or to check in on a student through that phone call. That idea
and using experts, using your students as experts, you know, both online and in school, you know. So if you can find a student who's learned it, and, you know, we know the best way to embed something is to teach it to someone else. So, you know, use of those students as well is, you know, we encourage our teachers to use anything you can to overlearn, overteach, because that's what, you know, those students are missing really. But yeah, I think they would be my key highlights, I think, of things that have worked well. We've struggled, you know, I would love to say IEPs, but we've struggled to make them meaningful really via distance. You know, it would have been a case of rewriting the rule book on IEPs to make them meaningful for the students who are still via distance. You know, so that's an ongoing thing for us to try and make those impactful.
And that may be an area.
We do have to acknowledge this is a temporary thing. This is not going to be forever. I think we have to acknowledge that there are many children in the world who have missed lots of education for lots of different reasons, whether that's medical, you know, over generations. It's not just now. you can have a child struggling with a medical condition that's been in hospital for years and then reintegrated into school. And we've heard stories on LinkedIn and across the media of, you know, refugees who've not spoken English, who've not been in education, who turn up in the UK at the age of 12 and are put into the system and they learn English. There was an article on the newspaper, on the news last night, I think, about a refugee who entered the system at the age of 13, no English, and he's just been accepted onto a doctor course, a medical course at university, and has had amazing achievement. So I think there is a different story for children of determination, children with special needs, because we don't want them to lag behind, but also we can, I don't like catch up, we can help these children to still be successful even if they have missed a year of education. And we know that as educationists, we know we have spiral curriculum in a lot of the systems. We know that we can go back and overteach and overlearn, and that there is space and time to do that. And we do have to give ourselves a little bit of a break. We didn't ask for this. This isn't our making. We have to just keep supporting each other to do the very best by each individual child, and we will get them there. Education is a marathon, not a sprint. And losing a few months, to me, as long as the children are well and healthy and alive and happy and having some form of connection, we will get them there, because that's what we do, because we've always done that. That's nothing new.
I think that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I think that's very much what we see in the UK as well. There's a lot of sensationalism in the media, definitely about how we're going to have a lost generation of children, and there's going to be, this is going to be a problem for the years to come. Children are resilient. They are probably some of the most resilient people in society, and especially the children that we work with who in special educational needs that have to come over so much to get to where they are. These children have already proved that they're resilient, and they will continue to prove that they're resilient.
My own husband is who hates, oh, sorry, Louise. My own husband who hates when I talk about him on webinars. He's somebody who grew up in a revolution and a war, and you know, throughout both of those did miss a substantial amount of school, and yet there's a lot of learning that you get from observing conflict. So I think it is important, and I'm quoting Asha Alexander, the principal of Kindergarten Starters, in saying this: we have to acknowledge what the children have learned even when they've been out of school at the same time. But I wanted to talk with you, Patrick, for a minute about the data that you're getting in, because you do have, you know, most, if not all, of your students back at this stage. You talked a little bit about the impact of the hybrid learning model and trying to get the students at least up to where they were this time last year. But how will the data that you're collecting inform instruction for the next year? How are you looking at instruction differently now than you might have been a year ago?
The main data that we've collected so far this year is that we've got around 25% of children that have shown some regression. So those are the children that we really need to focus on and really think about their curriculum and going forward from this point into next year. We'll see the main impact of this whole year, this whole COVID period, at the end of the year, when we really scrutinize the achievements pupils have made and any standardized testing that goes on. So in the UK, this has changed quite heavily or massively, where we will not have your formal examinations that you would normally have. What we're going to have teacher assessed assessments, which will have to be heavily moderated and quality assured to make sure that they're accurate. But this is when we'll find out which children aren't at the level we would hope them to be, and this is where we'll find out the real impact of the last year. What I would say is that the most difficult thing is to engage some of those families that's been mentioned, and these are the children at the minute in school where we really need to look at which families have not been totally engaged in the remote hybrid learning and what we can do for them. Those are the children that we need to look in school and think they may be the children that have missed some of the learning that could have gone on, and really look at what we've got in place. And this is where children, I know baseline was just mentioned before, this is where children will have to start re-baselining children to see between now and the summer of where children are on, and make sure that we've got a quality baseline where we've made sure that we have quality assured that. And this is be through the normal quality assurance procedures that we would see in a school where we complete some moderation, which we've been doing over the last couple of weeks. We would do some deep dives, book scrutinies, observation. But the main thing I would say that we need at the minute is really to empower teachers to what they're seeing in their classrooms, seeing across school, and have those discussions with each other, and really open the doors for staff to discuss and to share ideas, and to really think creatively how they can try new things to really help these children. Because the next thing that we will need to look at, which is in the UK, which is going to be difficult until I'd say September, is that external quality assurance. Because I know in a group of schools that I work in, we use very similar assessment systems. We follow very similar curriculum. We follow the same advice from central government. So that external moderation of relying on each other's expertise and relying on each other to look at things in a slightly different way and through a different lens is what gets the best for the children. And once we're able to do this is where schools can really think and modify their curriculum going forward to how we respond to this COVID. And what we have currently is that we have the media and government ministers coming out saying that schools will be open longer, holidays will change, more learning support assistants will be brought in, and these may be all great ideas and they may all work, but you have to have the plan and the strategic thinking behind that in every school or in every area of school to go forward to make sure this has an impact. And this is where the direction really needs to be thought about. In my opinion, the direction really needs to be thought about in British schools from this point to July, and then in September, you're really running on the curriculum that you've gone through. You've quality assured the assessment. You've had those professional discussions. You can really think about what is going to be responsive to the pupils in front of you, and you may not have the breadth that you previously had because you may feel like it's not appropriate for children to have all the areas of the curriculum. You may really feel that social communication is something that really needs to become a focus, and I know it does with the pupils that I work with, that remote learning and speaking to each other on screens, on telephones can only develop communication so much, but that face-to-face communication, children, especially with autism, getting a feel of how people react to them or the expressions people make, because obviously they find it very difficult to read these things, is we need to be giving them those experiences, and it's all about the experiences and how we plan our curriculum to give the children the experiences that they need.
Thank you so much for those insights, Patrick. I really appreciate that. I'm going to actually move a question kind of up on my list since we're talking about assessment. Louise, even for those folks who are not at British curriculum schools, I think we understand that assessment is changing. What do you see as the impact of the shift in the approach to assessment among British curriculum schools? And if you could just explain what that is a little bit for non-UK school folks. And then, what do you see as the impact to changes in assessment on students of determination or students with special education needs?
Sure. So within the UK system, at the age of 16, they take a series of GCSEs, which are provided to us by the UK government, and we administer those under test examination conditions. And for students of determination, students with special need, they have the exam access arrangements in accordance with the exam board in the UK, JCQ. And then we go through another 2-year program of A-levels and AS and A-levels, and then we sit another set at the age of 18 of JCQ exam board regulated assessments. And so this year, as similar to last year, a little bit different, but similar to last year, the teachers are awarding the grades for the children instead of taking the formal sit-down assessments. So we know that there's pros and cons of formal assessment, and that you will sit an English exam from 10 o'clock until 11 o'clock on Tuesday, and you will be measured against all the other children sitting the same exam. So the pros of that are, in the preparation, there's lots of time for children to have self-analysis, lots of time for them to do past papers, lots of time for them to revise. We know that exams are a tool for life, because it is something that we generally, you know, depending on your profession, we have to go through assessment throughout our life, and we do need to get used to that process. We do know that if you are successful, then that can increase confidence and self-esteem in you as you go through the process. It also teaches children to self-regulate their anxiety, so that they, because again, anxiety is something we're all faced with when we have heavy workloads, when we're told to go into lockdown. We all have that, oh my goodness, I've got 400 hours work to do and I've got 2 hours to do it. So being able to self-regulate and manage that is an important life skill. So, and obviously then the results are all standardized, and this can help us to detect flaws in teaching. So not necessarily, so the process leading up to the exams, when we do mocks and when we do practice assessments, we can identify where we might have misconceptions across a group of children. So it's not that the teachers are doing a bad job, but that we know that sometimes we're not delivering what the children need in order to make that assessment meaningful. So there's lots and lots of pros to having an exam system. The cons are that when we are doing teacher assessed grade, we need to make sure that all the teachers are trained and have the same level of ethos and ethic and moral behind what they're awarding. So that standardization and moderation may take place very thoroughly and rigorously across one department, but are we doing that across different departments and different subjects so that we are having that equity across? We also need to, so we then lose that ability to manage children's anxiety. So we put into place, what we've done is we've put into place lots of mocks, we've put into place lots of real-time, real assessment processes through the year since September. Lots of, but again, our students, they're at home, like Claire said, when you have students at home, you have no idea really if their work is theirs, or if they have a tutor sitting beside them, or if they have Google under the desk. A lot of that we don't always know. So we use something called ExamsNet, so we can put the paper up and the children can only access that screen. If they come off the screen, the exam shuts down. So there is some technology behind what we're doing to ensure that we have that rigor across our assessment. I think the biggest thing for me about teacher assessed grades is, having been doing this for 20 years and working with children with autism and ADHD, and probably a little bit myself too, I don't perform at my best, and I know many of my students don't perform at their best until they are under the pressure of, you have an hour, demonstrate. So I've worked with a child with autism who made a lot of sense to me, because he said, I'm not explaining in my mock paper what photosynthesis is, because I know the teacher knows what photosynthesis is. I don't need to explain it to the teacher. So I used to have an alien puppet in my classrooms where I'd say, okay, you're not explaining it to me, you're explaining it to this man in outer space who doesn't know what water is, who doesn't know what sunlight is. So explain it to the alien, don't explain it to me. And I know from history, from year on year on year, my ADHD kids and my autistic kids do far better in real assessment than they do in mocks, because that isn't, they know it's not the pressure, they know it's a practice. And I think having that history of mocks through their life, they know it doesn't mean anything, but they know the GCSE does mean something, so they all perform better. And I don't think that that is a widely known fact amongst typical teaching staff who are moderating these exams, to be able to implement that. So if they're a CB borderline student, they would get that B in a real exam. If they're a BA student, they would get that A in the exam. And it's having that confidence. I don't think teachers have the confidence to know, and I don't think we've done any analytical, data moderation about the reality that this does happen. I have anecdotal, I can tell you year on year, my children with SEND always perform better than they were predicted to perform. And I don't think that that's widely accepted and acknowledged. So that for me is the con of having those assessments.
I had no idea. I'll say that.
Right.
absolutely. And
I don't know, I might
when
be wrong, because that's just my experience and what I talk to with my friends. I don't know, Claire, Patrick, do you see the same kind of trend with your students?
I would say, especially in maths, I teach a lot of maths, and what I definitely see in maths is that children do exceed expectations, especially in that black and white. And it's, as you say, with a lot of children with autism, their rationale for working that hard on the lesson won't be there, especially if there's a subtle change, whether it be the weather, whether it be elsewhere in the learning environment. They're not going to perform consistently every lesson. But if they have the idea at this exam is going to be the thing that really measures them, they'll work with that.
Yeah.
It certainly strikes me that, a great deal of thought and training will need to go into this. And Claire, earlier you were talking a bit about training in these small chunks. And part of that is because this has been a completely new space for everyone. Of course, like online learning is not new, but being a brick and mortar school and shifting into online and certainly simultaneously teaching online and in-person students. This is new, right? And so there have been a lot of unknowns. Now we're starting to get a better sense as to what's working and what's not working. But I'm really curious about school improvement planning for next year. And so as you're working with the school leaders, with the principals across your network, what guidance are you giving them with regard to inclusion and school improvement planning?
I mean, absolutely. And it's been everybody's priority about, what next year is going to look like. All of our school principals, whether they are charter, ad hoc or academies principals, have been instructed to create a kind of close the gap curriculum. So as part of their school development plan, they've got this addendum which is completely focused on closing the gap. Now that gap is not just the academic gap, as Louise was saying. We need to know how they're coming in and what they're coming in with. A lot of ranges of anxiety. Some students are running in, can't wait to be back. Others are pensive. Others are very, very worried that they are behind. Some are worried that they've got no friends anymore. Our cohort has changed. So many people lost their jobs. They're going back to classes which that are unrecognizable to some of their students. Many of our private schools had pilots' families in them. Well, those pilots have now gone. So in a year, their friendship groups have changed. Some teachers are not there anymore. So to really be mindful at all points of the level of anxiety and the emotional health of, one, their children, two, their staff who have had a year that really, if teachers have survived this year, they are just, they're certainly my heroes. And also the anxiety of parents, that we've got a triangle of stakeholders in our schools who, and they all deserve equal care. Obviously students are our priorities, but if their families are not okay, then they are not okay. If their teachers are not okay, then they're not going to be able to put things in place that can close gaps and accelerate learning and make rapid progress, or even make their children feel safe. So if our teachers don't feel safe and secure, how are they going to make their students feel safe and secure? So this kind of closing the gap addendum to it, the school development plan, has been really, and each principal's done it in their own way. They haven't been told how to write it, but it's been really interesting to see, the ideas and things that people have come. One school has taken away the traditional reporting statements, for example. So the anxiety that parents have, and children themselves have, and teachers have for performance management and KPIs and those things, that stress has been taken away. So they're not coming in as A's, B's, C's anymore. They're not going to be reported as those really, really strict and stringent guys. They're going to be emerging, or they're going to be developing, or they're going to be embedding. So it's a much more gentle language that one school has chosen to use. They're offering credit catch-up sessions, you know, so that it's delivered to the students in a way where it's your chance to kind of make up this, and then it's a bank of credits that you can have, especially for our American curriculum schools, which lend itself much better. That doesn't work quite as well as in a GCSE cohort, but you know, different things like that. They've been really innovative in their way to make children feel happy, safe, and secure. And we've tried to think of everything a child could be worried about and get that in, but there's always something, isn't there, that's not there. But that really has been the basis. I think, yeah, of course we don't want them to academically fall behind, but as Louise said, you know, they'll make it up. They really will make it up. You know, and our SEN students, they're used to being behind, and they're used to feeling behind, and they're used to having to catch up. This isn't a new feeling for them. This is their normal. So, you know, in a way, as long as the gap hasn't increased so much, they might have actually been given a little bit of slack, some of them, you know, but and I think focusing also on the things that have worked well, which, you know, many things have worked really well this year, and not letting go of those, making sure there is the option for using the platforms and the hybrid learning. I mean, PTCs are so much easier now. You can do them via Zoom, via Teams. You know, it's really streamlined that situation. You know, so things like that we can hold on to. I think schools will do that. But yeah.
So let's talk about that. What are we holding on to, right? What's been really effective? Patrick, can you give me some examples? What aspects of hybrid learning or the online learning experience for students of determination or special education needs students do you want to see remain? What's worked? And would love concrete examples of what you want to see kept in.
I think the thing that we would really like to see remain, especially in the school I'm working in at the minute, is a focus on the things that matter. That seems to be have come up in engaging parents in that. What I'm basically talking about in our establishment is that every child has an educational healthcare plan, which a set of targets are put on for where we want a child to get to at the end of a couple of years. So we have that for cognition and learning, communication, interaction, social, emotional, mental health, and sensory and physical. So a child will have 4 targets. What we then do is then break those targets down into what you call an ILP. I would have thought we call them PLIMs, personal learning intention maps. We make those into SMART targets. So it's really just working on 4 or 5 targets with a parent that we want. I think what we can do at times is overall families and parents and put too much onto them, especially those families that we've struggled to engage. So if we really break it down and make the learning really important to the pupil and important to what the families want to see their children move forward with, and also make it engaging. So setting up fun activities. I think where we've seen the most success is where activities have been fun for the parent as well as the child, and there's been that relationship building between parent and child, and about the parent really seeing the progress that a child's making and the things that will really matter to them going forward, whether it be their independence, whether it be their social communication, whether it be their emotional regulation. Really looking at these things and giving families a little bit of a free rein as well, where we say, this is the target, these are the activities that I think would work really well. However, if you want to try something else, take some photos, take some videos, send them back to us, show us how it's going, and we'll keep monitoring that, and to make it fun as possible for parents and children.
I think also what teachers have had to do is learn how to use other mediums for students to show what they can do. And I think that's a real positive. So now every teacher is an expert in the whole suite of Microsoft inclusive facilities. You know, so if a child wants to make a mind map, they can. If they want to use the post-it board, they can. If they want to submit a video, that's been all right. So hopefully that kind of thing has been more normalized, and that's got to be a good thing. You know, that the different means of students being able to show what they know and what they've learned, I think that's a positive, and I hope we can hold on to that.
really
And
interesting.
you mentioned
too.
2 others as well, which were video content that's available to children to watch and watch and watch as much as they want. And the other thing was the parents' evening, being able to access people. I mean, I love now that I don't have to flip between this office and that office and this office to have meetings with parents. And also one thing that's really increased for me is if I needed to have an IEP meeting or a PLIM meeting or a parent meeting, I would usually just get one parent, either mum or dad, because one would be working or looking after the other children. But now we're doing it through Medium. I can have dad in the office and mum at home, or mum in the office and dad, you know, in a restaurant, and being able to do that. I mean, I had a Zoom meeting with a mum yesterday who was in the back of a taxi. So, you know, being able, that flexibility to meet people when I need to in different areas is phenomenal. We've done different countries, you know, dad's been in China and mum's been in, you know, Austria. It's been, but I think that is really going to help us to have that triangulation of all parents, not just one parent. That's been huge.
So with all of this, I mean, I think the points that have been raised around teacher well-being are so critical. And I think one thing that's been really amazing this year have been the networks that have emerged formally or informally, as well as networks that have had to shift and go online. And Louise, as you said, you oversee a network of 140 schools. Is that right?
144, yeah.
144 schools. What are you planning to do in the upcoming year to support teachers with their inclusion efforts? And how is that different now from what it might have looked like a year ago?
So BSME have really taken to the online platform, because those 144 schools are across the Middle East. Meetings and conferences and network get-togethers were always in person and were very difficult and expensive and time-consuming. So what they did originally, right at the beginning of this, is they created a bunch of networks by topic. So I manage the inclusion network, but we have EAL network leads, we have English network leads, we have maths network leads. I mean, there's a massive list of all the different networks that are happening. And those networks are performing in 3 different ways. So we have every 2 months, we have a webinar on that specific topic with speakers. So we have the webinars like everybody else. We have chat forums now on the BSME website. If you have an inclusion question, you can go onto the chat forum and we can respond to that. So you've got your networks being built, your bi-monthly webinars and your chat forums for BSME, which has been phenomenal. Within I was going to say UAE, but actually we have people from Africa and Singapore, and we started this was born of a group of friends, my friend Catherine and Susie and myself. I think we were about 2 weeks into lockdown in March, and just sitting here feeling, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough for my children. I'm not doing enough for my friends. How on earth do I help teachers? What do I do? So we just went, anybody want to join us for a chat and a coffee? And we all came on Zoom, and it born the Wellbeing Inclusion Network across, which is separate to the BSME. So it's a more informal. BSME is formal, and the Wellbeing Inclusion Network is very informal. Anybody can join. We have a different topic every 2 weeks, and we alternate SEND with well-being, and it has been teacher well-being at the forefront of nearly 50% of our webinars have been, what can we do? How can we, you know, we can't buy flowers, but we could give people half an hour off. Can we cover people's lessons? Can we create a video and share it amongst our teams? How can we help teacher well-being? And that's been massive. We've got 500 Senkos on that group who come in regularly and talk, and I can see a couple of names here for people who join us. So that's fortnightly. That's really come off. In terms of priorities for us for next year, or for the tomorrow, for the next, is to continue embedding. We have a Dubai inclusive education policy, so it's to continue embedding that, which has kind of in some areas has had to stall because we're not in school. Embedding that practice, continuing the training. So we talk about the students having those videos so that they can pre-learn and overlearn. We've created a whole bank of videos that people can come and watch for, you know, what is a good IEP? and how does that fit into your context? Because every context has a different format. What are your strategies for differentiation? How do we upskill each other? And the biggest thing from all of the networks is we're all okay. We are all doing brilliantly, and we need to give ourselves a break and a pat on the back, because this wouldn't have happened in the 1801 pandemic. This wouldn't have happened in the 1701 pandemic. This is phenomenal what we're doing, and everyone's just coping, and we need to give ourselves a break with that, because we have done, every single teacher I know, every Senko I know, every leader, anybody that's involved in education, the outpouring when we went into lockdown, the amount of technology that was provided to us for free. And I know that some of that was a lost leader, and I know that some of that was intended to up their own profits, but the intention to provide us with technology that we could use and with no obligation to buy. It wasn't, we'll give you 3 months for free and you have to buy the contract. It was completely free, and that's education. And actually the world has really, really come together in a lot of good ways, which is what we want to take forward, right? That's inclusion. Everyone belonging. That's inclusion.
That's amazing. I think, one of the schools that we work with, actually Lagos, Nigeria, they did a survey for their students on what practices were working, what practices weren't working. And one of the teachers or school leaders was telling me that in the survey, one of the students said, "You're being too hard on yourself. You're doing everything you can." And I think it's really beautiful that the students actually see, probably more than parents, how different the teacher's role is, how many more responsibilities have been placed on them. So I'm going to ask you each for one last thing as we wrap up. And it's actually more for the teachers and educators who've joined us this afternoon. What's one of your top self-care tips as we navigate this complex and uncertain time? Whoever wants to start us off.
Turn off your computer regularly, really regularly. Make sure that you have time designated. I'm rubbish at it. I don't turn off. I'm here 5 o'clock, still going at it. I've got another meeting straight after. I am absolutely rubbish at the self-care thing, because I get my satisfaction from helping everybody else. I think, like a lot of people in inclusion, we have to make sure everyone else is okay and we don't worry about ourselves. But if I have anything for anyone, make sure you turn off your screen regularly for good self-care time. That's television screen, phone screen, laptop screen, iPad screen. All technology needs to. Don't leave us. Everyone's leaving now.
Yeah, I know. I was like, not yet. We've got one more minute.
Hang on.
Not in the middle of our webinar.
Turn off the technology at some point tonight.
Yeah, 501. It's all good. Patrick,
I would say enjoy your weekends. Really, weekends are for the kids. Even though they've been at home, we haven't been really with them if we're parents. My weekends now are 100% for my children. No work at the weekend.
That's different, right?
It's a little bit of both there, where I would very much say don't have your emails on personal devices. When if it's your personal device, don't have your email on there.
That causes me so much anxiety. You have no idea.
But what generally happens is that you end up checking the email just last thing before you go to bed or something like that, and it can then interrupt your sleep. But also, yes. I think that timing thing is very important as well. Is if you decide and at the start of the day you're going to be leaving work at 5 o'clock, make sure you leave work at 5 o'clock and make some time for yourself. That if you want to go out for a walk, if you want to go and do some exercise, make time for that. I'm a father of three children under 6, and I know sort of by the time I get home, then it's dinner time and then it's bedtime. By 7 o'clock, it's really that time where it's like, right, I need some time for myself now to switch off and charge up for the next day.
Wonderful self-care tips. For everyone who's here, I just want to let you know we will be running another webinar this time next week. The focus of that webinar is on child protection and safeguarding in hybrid learning, which again is one of those sort of complex topics. We'll be sending out information on that the following week. It will actually be on Monday at a later time. and it's going to be on quality assurance. So that's a super interesting topic, I know, for our team. Claire, Louise, Patrick, thank you so much for your generosity of spirit and for your time today. We're very, very grateful for to all of you.
Thank you.
May I share your LinkedIn details with the participants? Great.
Yes, please.
Okay, well, thank you. Have a wonderful night, everyone, and go turn off your screens now.
Yes.
Cheers.
Absolutely. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, Al. Thank you.
Bye, nice
Cheers.
to meet you all. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.